I invite you to take your copy of the Word of God, turn to Hebrews chapter 11, and we are in verse number 6. And that's it, one verse. It's a lot in here. It says, without faith, it is impossible to please him, for he who comes to God must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who seek him. Okay, at first glance, that sounds like a rather run-of-the-mill statement about the necessity of faith in order to be in a relationship with God. It would seem rather common sense. After all, every and all religions are all about people's faith, what people believe in. It should come as no surprise that Christianity likewise requires a step of faith on behalf of its adherents. However, this verse, I think, really challenges our narrative, even Christians' narrative, of what we think is God's responsibility. The word here, without faith it's impossible to please him. Impossible, anadidomtos is the Greek word. Without strength, powerless, unable to be done, impotent. And please, you are estheo, to gratify entirely, to be well-pleasing. Have you ever thought about that? It is our responsibility to please God. That's what he says here. He who comes to him must believe that he is, and he is a rewarder of those who what? Seek him. Did you ever contemplate the notion that it's your responsibility to seek God? Well, I thought God was seeking us, right? Because Jesus says, in Luke 19, the Son of Man has come to seek and to save the lost. So I like that verse better. You know, I prefer that idea. I prefer what Jesus said here in Matthew when he told this story. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep and one of them goes astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go search for the one that is straying? If it turns out that he finds him, truly I say to you, he rejoices all the more over the 99 who did not go astray. So it's not the will of your Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. I think this image is something that we really prefer. That's that idea of the good shepherd, and he's rescuing the lost sheep. And we see ourselves in that, aren't we? That Jesus found us, and that matches our idea of it's God's job to find us. But then we also have these verses. Deuteronomy chapter 4. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses writes, but from there you will seek the Lord your God, and you will find him if you search after him with all your heart, with all your soul. The Proverbs says, I love those who love me, God writes, and those who seek me diligently find me. Prophet Zephaniah, seek the Lord, all you humble of the land who do his just commands. Seek righteousness, seek humility. Perhaps you may be hidden on the day of the anger of the Lord. This is a verse that we always quote. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear and I will forgive their sins and I will heal their land. And then we also know that Jesus says, ask and it shall be given you. Seek and ye shall find. Saysif, right? All the Saysif people. Knock and the door will be open for you. So all these verses coincide and affirm the concept that we glean from Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6, that we have a responsibility to seek God. We have an obligation to please God. So last weekend, there was 20,000 people who showed up to Asbury College in the little town of Wilmore, Kentucky. The town has a population of 6,000 people. 20,000 people just, boom, showed up there from Canada and Finland and the Netherlands and all over the U.S. And why were they there? Revival. I read several articles about the revival in Asbury, and it wasn't just happening in Asbury, but other campuses as well, in Cedarville and Lee University and Sanford. Those were some places named that people were praying for revival. And I read about how people from all over are flocking to these small university towns to experience revival and feel close to God's Spirit. And as with anything happening in the media, there were some people criticizing the event and the motives of the people traveling so far to attend. But I read one comment that I thought was quite astute with regards to the question, why do people feel the need to travel from all over the U.S. and other countries just to go to Little Asbury? Someone replied, well, if they were feeling God's presence in their local churches, maybe they wouldn't feel the need to travel all the way to Kentucky. And I thought, touche. If you're in a spiritually dry, barren place, a desire to be in the presence of God would be like water. Matter of fact, I think it's an encouraging sign for our nation that people are seeking the Lord. That is what we see is something we ought to be doing, according to Hebrews chapter 11, verse 6. And if we do, God will reward us. Now, I noted that this verse follows the testimony of Enoch that we learned last week. Enoch, by faith, did not see death. God took him up. Why? Because he was pleasing to God. Enoch was so pleasing, God spared him from death. Wow, wouldn't that be amazing to be so pleasing to God that you could just skip over death? How would that even be possible? And the author informs the audience, it was so because of faith. Matter of fact, faith is such an essential ingredient, the author elaborates, it's impossible to please God without it. And this seems to explain why, from the previous example of faith, Cain and Abel, Cain's sacrifice was rejected, but Abel's was accepted. Abel had faith. Cain did not come to God with faith. He thought that God ought to be looking for him. And God should be interested in what Cain had to offer. And it seems to me that many people have this mindset. They think, well, the onus, the burden, is on God to prove himself to me. It's God's responsibility to find me and win my heart. It's God's job to verify himself to me, and I can fact check him, and then I can believe in him. This song I'm going to quote, it was released in 2008 by The Fray. I don't know if anybody likes The Fray, but it seems to express this feeling. I forget the dude's name. He sings, I found God on the corner of First and Amistad. I said, where you been? And he said, ask me anything. Where were you when everything was falling apart, when all my days were spent by a telephone that never rang? All I needed was a call that never came to the corner of First and Amistad. Lost and insecure, you found me. You found me lying on the floor, surrounded. Why'd you have to wait? Where were you? Where were you? Just a little late. The artist grapples with the painful truth that many people experience. God does not deliver us from hurt and pain, from the chaos that life brings. And when these traumas are happening to us, he doesn't burst in and save the day. Homes and marriages that started out happy and hopeful get seriously messed up, and people break apart, and the children are wounded in the midst of this, and then this brokenness and this pain and these offenses, they lead to questioning the goodness of God. And the artist sings to God, where were you when everything was falling apart? A good God would not allow this to happen to me. I won't believe in a God that didn't bother to pick up the phone and check in on me. I know a young fella, 18 years old, his parents are divorced. When he was young, despite growing up in church and Christian school, through the pain of his parents' inattentiveness to his spiritual well-being, he got completely disoriented about life and God and who he is. And he now, at 18, has got it all figured out. He's an atheist now, and he's exploring alternative lifestyles, and he believes that that's the answer, and that's going to set him free of all of his pain. And yet, he's completely paralyzed with anxieties and bitterness and resentfulness. And that's just one of a million stories of people who get so disoriented about who they are and who God created them to be. And I know that that is true of people even in here. You're under the persuasion that God has this obligation to prove himself to you. I know this is going to sound insensitive probably, and a bit edgy. But here's a hard fact. God does not owe you anything. God does not need you, and God does not have to prove himself to you. If you die not knowing God, that is not his fault. There is no moral high ground in hell. There will be no debating at the great white throne. You won't be putting God on the stand and asking him a bunch of questions. God doesn't answer to you. Anybody who thinks that way has a very exalted opinion on themselves, and that pride will be the death of you, and that's not hyperbole. That's not overstatement for dramatic effect. Think about this. Who here is going to die? Like by show of hands, how many people know that you only live so long, and then once your day's up, you die? Is that a fact? Okay, so due to that fact, that we are finite creatures with a limited amount of shelf life and a very limited amount of knowledge about our own dimension and extremely less knowledge about any other dimension outside of our physical existence, doesn't it seem logical to concede that probably we are not the best ones to be in the position to question, demand, and dictate to God who and what he ought to do for us? Since we have a limited and finite understanding, don't you think it might be best to just listen and learn from an eternal, infinite creator God to, what's the author say? Seek him. Well, think about it for a moment. When my children were babies, Eliana and I purchased some car seats, and we used to secure the children in the back seat of the car, in the car seats where we travel places. We did that primarily for their safety. As time went on, we learned that some car seats are, older. They're not as safe, and they didn't meet the regulations, so we would have to upgrade. And, 5-point harnesses are the best to put them in, and infant seats ought to be facing this way, the rear, and then you got to put those anchor things. Remember we installed those anchor things in our cars to make sure they were all strapped in properly. And we looked for the recommendations, and we listened to the experts, and then we bought and installed the car seats, and then we strapped the children in them. But you know what we didn't do? We never bothered to ask our infant sons what they thought on the matter. Because the fact of the matter is, even though the car seats affected them directly, the babies don't have the ability or the intelligence to give any insight or feedback on the topic. As little babies, they did not always like being strapped in the car seat. One time we drove 5 hours with Ricky screaming most of the way because he didn't like his car seat. And I think that's why he can sing so loud, because I'm working on it for a long time. Well, maybe he was uncomfortable. Maybe he did not like being in the car seat. Maybe you should have taken his opinion into consideration. Okay, well, maybe all that's true. Be that as it may, his opinion did not matter. He did not understand the concept of the automobile transportation or the laws that govern seatbelts and car seats. He did not know the occasion why we had to travel 5 hours to visit family up in New Brunswick. All baby Ricky knew was what? Not much, other than he didn't like being in the car seat. But that's not enough of a reason to sway a responsible parent's decision to put him in a car seat. In the same manner, you and I are infants when it comes to understanding God and all that he's doing. There's an entire book on that subject that makes this very point. It's the book of Job. Job got put in a car seat. He didn't like it. Job's life sucked. He got hurt really bad. Lost all of his money, lost his health, lost his respect in the community. All of his kids died, and God permitted all that to happen. Job was very devout. He was a faithful man. He was righteous. He feared the Lord. He thought he knew what God wanted. But then all this calamity hits the fan, and Job's wondering, why, God? Why have you allowed me to experience this pain? I didn't deserve this. And so there are all these questionings and reasonings and debating going on by Job and his friends about the nature of God. It sounds very much like that phrase song I had quoted earlier. Lost and insecure, you found me lying on the floor. Why'd you have to wait? Where were you? Where were you? Just a little late. Well, finally, God chimes in on the matter. There's 37 chapters of that. And then in the 38th chapter, you want to turn there, Job 38, verse 1. Then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Gird up your loins like a man, and I will ask you, and you will instruct me. Where were you? Oh, there's the line again. Turn back around. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understandings. Who set its measurements, since you know? Or who stretched the line of it? On what were the bases sunk? Or who laid its cornerstone? When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy? Or who enclosed the sea with doors when bursting forth it went out from the womb? When I made a cloud its garments and a thick darkness its swaddling band, and I placed boundaries on it, and I set the bolts and the locks, and I said, thus you shall come, but no farther. And here shall your proud waves stop. Verse 16, have you entered into the springs of the sea or walked in the recesses of the deep? Have the gates of death been revealed to you? Or have you seen the gates of the deep darkness? Have you understood the expanse of the earth? Tell me if you know all this. And doesn't stop there. There's just 2 chapters of God asking Job questions, and Job gets the point. I don't have the cognitive ability to comprehend all God is and does. And so he says to God in verse 40, he says, Job answered the Lord and said, I'm insignificant. What can I reply to you? I lay my hand on my mouth. Once I've spoken, I will not answer, even twice. I will add nothing more. But God's not done. And he keeps going through chapter 40 and 41. And finally in chapter 42, Job concedes. Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I declare that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak, and I will ask you, and you instruct me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I retract and repent in dust and ashes. So this is the right answer when it comes to God. Humility, respect, and contrition. Realizing when it comes to comprehending the eternal will of God, you're a baby. Like Job, we don't understand much of anything. And the best you can do is listen and learn and think. Think. Your life is so very brief. And yet God has been speaking to humanity for thousands of years. Maybe you ought to try to get caught up on the conversation before you start screaming out your ill-informed feelings. Well, that's kind of condescending. Making us feel a little dumb. How come Pastor Rob never says nice, soothing, sensitive things? Maybe because I'm looking at a society where children are getting groomed and preyed upon by perverts, and a huge percentage of the population think that's okay. Half the population thinks that killing babies is good. People are trapped in misery and in slavery, depression and addiction. Opioids and fentanyl is wiping people out. When people start walking away from the light of truth, they're walking into the lies of darkness. It destroys lives and families and generations. Am I just supposed to pretend none of that is happening and people are living happy, well-adjusted lives and people are making wise decisions and everybody's just fine? Because they're not. People are in serious pain and so many souls are in jeopardy. I can't preach peace and safety when destruction is coming. If it's God's job to make everyone happy and save everyone from the chaos of life, then he's not very good at his job, or maybe he's not trying to please us. Rather, the onus is on us to trust in him and please him. There's a sifting going on of wheat and tares, sheep and goats. Those who believe in God will have to make their stand, and those who do not, they will suffer their faith. And I'm sorry if that message does not please you, but I'm not trying to please you. trying to please God. And hopefully I'm giving you a reason why you ought to try to please God. And the reason is this, according to the author of Hebrews: God will reward you if you diligently seek him. Enoch by faith pleased God. Without faith it is impossible to please God. He who comes to God, you got to believe that he is, and that he's a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. Why do I believe in God? Three quick reasons. Write them down. First of all, general revelation. General revelation. Creation, life, intelligent design, irreducible complexities. Write that down. Irreducible complexities. Do you know what that term means? If you do not understand that a simple cell is not simple, that there are so much complexities going on in a DNA molecule, if you don't understand the science behind the simple cell, and you cannot reason that it's impossible for a system so complex to just randomly evolve, if you don't understand the term irreducible complexities, then you haven't put any serious thought into the matter. So just be honest. Just admit that. Just say, I haven't done my research on irreducible complexities. Okay, well, maybe you should. Maybe you should seek that out. Modern day physicists have all moved off of believing in the physical world and evolution. They've given up on all that long ago. They're off exploring the God particle and the Higgs boson theory, and they're looking for the multi-dimensions, and they're looking for the interdimensional beings that seeded the earth. Yeah, starting to sound a lot like creationists. Multi-dimensional beings who seeded the earth. I learned about that in Sunday school. In the beginning, God created the earth. Modern scientific discoveries, which they don't teach you in public school biology 101, are way past Darwinism. Maybe you ought to seek that out. General revelation, common sense. That's my first reason. Second, specific revelation. The things that God has said in his word. And once again, most people who reject the Bible really haven't spent a whole lot of time studying it. They come up with some really good questions, and they haven't looked for the answers. They just are asking some good questions and feel like, well, that passes for deep thinking, but it doesn't. Meanwhile, I can show you hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of prophecies that God made in his word hundreds of thousands of years ago, and that have come true. The God of the Bible is the God who declares the end from the beginning. He tells us what's going to happen, and then he does it, thus proving he's there and he's speaking. So not reading, not listening, not paying attention, not knowing the history, that's not an acceptable answer. You really ought to seek some of that specific revelation. My third reason is what we call dynamic. It's what God has done for me personally. God has answered my prayers, and God has changed my life, and I've seen miracles. You want to hear about a recent miracle that just happened for us? Anybody want to? A few people want to hear a miracle. All right. I'll tell you, just a recent miracle just happened, okay? So I told you on vacation in Ecuador, we visited 4 different cities. To make all this a reality, we took 6 different airplanes, 5 buses, and probably 15 different cabs in a 10-day period. Now, on one of those cab rides, we were going to catch a bus to leave this city to go to another city 5 hours away. We get in the cab to go catch the bus, and Tony's phone falls out of his pocket and left it in the cab. But he didn't know that happened. It wasn't until we were on the bus ride traveling that he notices his phone's missing, and he assumes, well, it must have fallen out in the cab. But doesn't really know that for a fact. Now, we don't have the cab driver's number. We don't have any contact information. We caught the cab outside of a Wyndham hotel that we weren't staying at, and the cab driver did not work for the hotel. So the hotel has no record of which independent cab drivers pick up guests at their hotel. And since we weren't even a guest, why would they care about us? So we're on our 5-hour bus ride. There's no way for us to track down the phone. And I'm thinking, well, that iPhone, that's long gone. Sorry, Tony. Sucks to be you. Anyways, we call the hotel. You got to try. So call the hotel in the hopes that they might have some information. Well, they don't. They don't know the cab drivers. They don't have any numbers for us to call. And they don't even know us. So dead end. Nevertheless, we leave our contact information in the event that this phone might show up. And we do have some family in that city that would go and retrieve it for us. Also realize that this city is notorious for pickpocketing, and iPhones are a big thing to steal. So then you got to ask yourself, why would anyone turn a lost one in? Someone got into the cab and found it. Why would they turn it in? Why not just keep it? If the cab driver gets it, why would he not just keep it? Why would he turn it in? And if they turn it into the guy at the desk, why would he not just keep it? So seems very hopeless. But on that bus ride, Tony, quietly to himself, prays for a miracle, that the phone would be found and returned. And before that bus ride was over, the phone was found and turned into the Wyndham Resort, and the guy at the resort contacts us, and a family member picks it up, and within 24 hours, Tony's got his iPhone back in his hand. And you can say, that's all pure luck. But I could eat up the rest of the day telling you story after story after story of the prayers that we have seen answered. So I'm sorry if you don't have any faith, but you haven't seen your prayers answered, but I will declare until the day that I die, my God shall supply all of your needs according to his riches found in glory. I have seen God do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think. I've seen so many prayers answered here at Faith Bible Church, I would be negligent. I would consider a dereliction of duty if I did not offer praises and prayer time in our services, because we see prayer requests answered weekly. I hope you're paying attention to that. And if you're not, well, maybe you should, because that's the dynamic reason why we believe in God. He answers our prayers. I can't make you have faith. Oh, I wish I could just kind of pull some out and give it to you. It doesn't work that way. You have to decide for yourself. I want to know God. Well, all I can implore you to do is what the psalmist implores all of us. Taste and see. The Lord is good. Blessed is the man who trusts in him. Enoch had achieved this lofty goal. He pleased God. And the author presents this to us as something that we ought to aspire to accomplish. But many people think that it is God's job for him to please us. Well, this proves that you don't understand life, where it comes from, who gave it to you, and that it's very short. God is real. Have faith in him, and this pleases him. If you seek him, he's going to reward you. How do I know? Well, my own life, but also these verses. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he will give you the desires of your heart. I could tell you stories all day long about answers to prayer that I got from that one, just that one verse alone. Paul writes in Timothy, henceforth laid up for me a crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award to me on that day, and not just me, but also to all who love his appearing. Revelations, the one who conquers and who keeps my works till the end, I will give him authority over the nations. Those are the rewards, just a few rewards. So here's the thing. There's no avoiding trials, temptations, pain, and chaos. It comes with living in this world. Everyone experiences that, whether you believe in God or not. But if you have faith and you diligently seek the Lord, James says, blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trials. For when he has stood the test, he receives, here's another crown, the crown of life, which the God has promised to those who love him. Ricky's going to come up here and play a song in just a minute. When it's all been said and done, there's just one thing that matters. Did I do my best to live for truth? Did I live my life for you? When it's all been said and done, all my treasures will mean nothing. Only what I've done for love's reward will stand the test of time. All of Jesus' disciples died for the sake of the gospel. And we're going to see later on in Hebrews chapter 11, all the sacrifices that people suffered and were tormented for their faith. And this is the testimony of Job. You go through fiery trials and you find that God is not saving you from them, but rather he is with you in the midst of the trials. And this pain is to test and to prove your faith. And Job concluded, but he knows the way I take. And when he's tried me, I will come forth as gold. So that is your responsibility. That is your assignment. You have to seek the Lord, to learn to trust Him, even through the pain, especially through the pain. Especially through the pain. If you do, you'll please Him and He will reward you. Let's listen to this song as we close.